I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're diving into the riveting world of legal thrillers and true crime with a terrific author, one of my favorite guests. Her name is Maureen Anne Meehan. Known for her captivating Mary MacIntosh series, Maureen brings suspense and intrigue to life in novels like The Tooth Fairy Killer, Red Hands, and Deputy Dog. Each book combines high-stakes investigations, complex characters, and the breathtaking landscapes of Wyoming, offering readers a thrilling and immersive experience. Beyond her novels, Maureen is also the host of a must-listen-to true crime podcast, where she explores real-life mysteries and the darker side of human nature with the same compelling storytelling that defines her books. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her amazing books. The links are below this interview. Maureen, great to see you here today on Spotlight. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. It's my honor to be a guest once again of yours, and I appreciate talking about the podcast. It's been a new pivot in my writing career, and I'm really enjoying it. We started this past week with our first Only the Truth podcast, and we focused on Red Hands, a Mary MacIntosh novel. And the reason I wanted to start with Red Hands is the missing and murdered Indigenous women movement is near and dear to my heart. I grew up obviously in Wyoming. My best friend was a native Crow, and we live next to the Crow Indian Reservation in northern Wyoming. And so the Native Americans in Wyoming carry a huge role. All over that entire area, there's a lot of agencies, reservations, and the people are so amazing. And in my book, Rodeo, it's about the cover is the cover of, or the Indian relay races at our hometown rodeo in Sheridan. But getting back to the podcast, and it's regarding Red Hands, a Mary MacIntosh novel. The reason this movement is so important to me is that so many women, Native women, go missing or murdered in the North America in general, and it's beyond. They're underinvestigated, unreported. I think in 2016, only 2% of the cases were reported to the Department of Justice. That number's staggeringly horrible. And in conjunction with that, 85% of Native women experience violence in their lifetimes, and 56% of them experience sexual violence in their lifetime. And most of it goes unreported, underreported, underinvestigated, not prosecuted. And there's a lot of jurisdictional issues that come to play with the Red Hands movements as far as tribal land versus federal land versus state authorities investigating. So I want to continue to bring awareness to the Red Hands movement in order to gain some traction and hopefully get some resolution for these families and these victims who have gone missing or murdered. So that is why we started the podcast with Red Hands. And I'm very proud of this novel. I think it's really well done. I bring the Zodiac into it because the Zodiac killer from the 60s and 70s was never caught. And so to increase most of my recent novels are on two true crimes merging together. So I have the Red Hands murders combined with the Zodiac killer. Is it a copycat? Is it the Zodiac? Has he come back? Because leaving ciphers as clues for Mary MacIntosh to try to prosecute and resolve. So then the next podcast we recorded this week is on Deputy Dog, or DB Cooper. And as you know, DB Cooper is one of those he has cult-like following. And I wrote this novel in August and September. Deputy Dog was a true crime that happened where my cabin is in Nederland, Colorado. Deputy Dog is a moniker of a Charles Manson cult, but hippie cult, but bad. And they kind of got run out of New York. They weren't on the West Coast like Charles Manson was. Deputy Dog's crew got ran out of New York City in the 70s. They went to Boulder, which was a hippie town. Then they eventually got kicked out of Boulder because they were selling drugs to college kids. So Deputy Dog was up in Nederland, Colorado, right in the Boulder Mountains, and he killed the sheriff.
Wow.
At the Pioneer Bar. True story, happened in 1971. Couple months later, DB Cooper hijacks that airplane from Portland to Seattle, goes missing. Both Deputy Dog on the run since 71, DB Cooper on the run,
Hmm.
right? Well, I wrote them converging in Sheridan, Wyoming, in my hometown, and I have this character as one shooting the sheriff in Sheridan, Wyoming, and Mac has to deal with this murder. But turns out that DB Cooper was never, that's not his name.
Hmm.
He bought the ticket as D Cooper. Somehow a reporter put the B in there. So he never was DB Cooper. But turns out he actually did go to Wyoming
Hmm.
after his mother, Karen, lived in southwestern Wyoming. That's where he ultimately went to. So it kind of follows my novel, which is
Yeah.
bizarre, but it was just discovered in November of 2024, very recently. His kids finally came forward, adult kids saying, "It was my dad who hijacked these planes. The four parachutes are in our family storage unit in North Carolina. My mother passed away. She did harbor him and protect him in southwestern Wyoming all those years, and he ultimately got married, had children, etc. And the children live in North Carolina. So they did turn over those four backpacks or parachutes to the FBI in November. That it's super recent. So I did my next podcast on Deputy Dogger DB Cooper. So the next one coming down the pipeline is going to be Dating Game. And
Hmm.
Dating Game is based on Rodney Ocala, the serial killer who killed hundreds of women,
Yeah.
hundreds. And he was very much um, like Ted Bundy, very charismatic, very handsome. And he lured women by saying, "Hey, would you model for me?" He was a photographer in
Hmm.
real, truly, he was. But he would lure women to remote places to take their photographs. He ultimately would kill them, asphyxiate them, revive them back to life, kill them again, pose them in very bizarre poses and take pictures. Well, they found his storage locker in Seattle, Washington, with hundreds of women photographs posed, and they still to this day don't know who all these people are. So he was ultimately, I think, prosecuted. He went to the death row in California, died of natural causes fairly recently. He was 77 on death row in California, but one of the murders was near my hometown in Wyoming that he did
Hmm.
in 78. And uh, he killed in Florida, New York, California, Utah, and Wyoming.
Hmm.
And it took them years to find Rodney Ocala. And he actually did appear on the Dating Game.
Amazing.
And he was the chosen contestant by this woman. She got the heebie-jeebies last minute and did not go on the date with him. It saved her life.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
that is it's crazy. So
Uh,
after we do Dating Game Monday on the
mhm.
podcast Only the Truth, we're going to pivot to my most recent novel, which is The Tooth Fairy Killer.
Mhm.
Again, true crime. So the Tooth Fairy Killer killed families, not one person at a time. He was brought up in foster care. He hated his mother and grandmother. They were very mean to him. He had a cleft lip. He was made fun of all of his life. And he killed two families, one in Birmingham, Alabama, and one in Atlanta, Georgia. And what he did is he would find the Pollyanna mom, who was the stay-at-home mother, the June Cleaver of the,
Mhm.
the town. He would stalk them, hide out, figure out the family's routine. And then on both cases, he came in the middle of the night, broke into their homes, let the pet dog out so the dog wouldn't bark, broke all the mirrors in the home, uh, killed the children first,
Hmm.
drugged the children into mom and dad's bedroom, staged them, uh, killed dad, and then he ultimately killed the mother.
Hmm.
And had them all staring at each other, took their eyeballs of all things. This is true
God.
crime. And he put the mirrors in place of their eyeballs. And that was and he bit every one of his victims. And that's why they called him the Tooth Fairy Killer, because of his teeth marks, which ultimately got him caught. But this man, true story, was communicating with Hannibal Lecter via
Hmm.
ciphers in the newspaper, the Tatler, and they would write to each other, putting out ads in the Tatler.
Hmm.
And the he was Hannibal Lecter from prison was coaching the Tooth Fairy Killer how to track down Will Graham, the FBI profiler that ultimately caught Hannibal Lecter and had moved to Florida.
Hmm.
And he told him the address via some cipher in the Tatler. And the Tooth Fairy Killer was on his way to Florida to kill Will Graham, the FBI profiler. and who was the profiler and the Zodiac killer. So these all kind of converges together. But the FBI got wind of this situation at Will Graham's home, and they were ultimately able to intercept this killing of this FBI profiler. But it's a all true crime. But the
Yeah.
Tooth Fairy killer, this serial killer killed families. That's unheard of. I mean,
Yeah.
most of them kill women one at a time. So that's kind of the direction we are going with that.
But it's
Since
really
you and I haven't talked,
fascinating. I love the fact that you take real crimes, novelize them so you can fill in some of the blanks and actually add to the storytelling. You were telling a lot there about the Tooth Fairy Killer, and you talked about Will Graham, you talked about Hannibal Lecter. Those are
yeah,
famous characters from fiction. Are there real life counterparts of these people?
there are.
Yeah,
There are real life counterparts. I mean, this is all true.
yeah.
And the Tooth Fairy Killer was a very bizarre man. He was obsessed with this painting, and he thought he was this painting. It was like this. It's from I think Genesis, where it's the red dragon and the woman clothed in sun, and it's a famous painting, and it's in a museum, I think in Baltimore. Uh, but he thought he was the red dragon in
Wow.
his he was mentally ill, obviously,
Mhm.
and ultimately, in becoming the Red Dragon, he was going to right the wrongs of the world by killing families. Bizarre,
Amazing,
true.
amazing. Well, you've got
Um,
great material for a true crime podcast, and also you're uniquely qualified to talk. You're not only an attorney, you had someone close to you murdered, I know that, and
yeah,
you're a judge. So you really put
mental health. Yeah,
mental health judge in the mental health arena. So I think you've got such great credentials for this podcast. And obviously, you're a natural born storyteller as well. So I wish you tremendous success with that. And
thank you.
who are you talking to during these podcasts? Is it a monologue or do you have guests? Tell us a little bit about the structure.
I I started this first one monologue, and
Hmm.
same with Red Hands is monologue, DB Cooper is monologue, but I think we're going to kind of pivot a little bit
Yeah.
and interact with people. And I invited people on the DB Cooper one to send me emails via my website
Hmm.
as what do they remember the day when they learned of DB Cooper's hijacking.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of starting to do more interaction with the population, and I'm going to invite guests.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out how to do that with this next few that we're going to be recording, because I just think that there's dating game, for example. I would love for people to come on, as guests on dating game
Who's
whenever we
had a real
record it
life
next week.
experience like that. Yeah, I think it'd be great. I think
Yeah,
you could talk to investigators either currently working or retired. Retired ones are great resources often because they can speak with more latitude than others.
right,
Journalists who have covered the cases, they're generally good resources as well. And
right,
there's a huge crime in Long Island, New York that I think would be terrific for you to explore, which is the Gilgo Beach killer, the serial killer Rex Heuermann, the accused serial killer Rex Heuermann, who
right.
had killed, 6, 8, 10, 12, God knows how many women. I mean, that's
Right.
part of the mystery of all of these serial killers is they're accused of killing 10, 12, or 15, but it might have been 30 or 100. We have no idea because they usually prey on the most vulnerable members of society, right?
Absolutely. That's why Red Hands is so ripe in that these Native women are vulnerable. They're
Yeah,
marginalized. They have no voice. I mean, the symbol of the red hand is about their silenced voices in the population, that they just don't have anyone who investigates their crimes,
yeah,
because serial killers do pick marginalized, isolated people to kill. And like Rodney Ocala, the dating game killer, killed hundreds and hundreds of people. They don't even know all the victims. And
yeah,
I mean, it's amazing how many serial killers there are. And like, think 98% of serial killers are men,
yeah,
and the majority of their victims are women.
yeah.
So, and women
Yeah.
are vulnerable, they're
And
just
well,
vulnerable.
if you look at Rex Heuermann, the guy I mentioned on Long Island, he was an
Right.
architect. He was married. He had an intact family. His daughter worked with him, but his wife was from overseas. And whenever she would leave for overseas, he'd go on a murderous spree, apparently, according to allegations, Again, he's not been convicted of anything yet,
Right.
but he's accused of killing these women inside his home that he shared with his wife and his daughter. So it's
How did he lure
mind-blowing.
women, right? How did he lure women inside his
He
home? Like,
lured them with money. They were largely prostitutes, yeah,
uh,
and
well,
escorts,
that
which,
was, I mean, Ted Bundy was able to lure people into his apartment all the time.
right.
And he'd act like he was injured. He'd
Yeah,
have like a
a
sling on his
sling or
arm and
something. Yeah,
couldn't
awful,
carry his groceries, and he'd ask for help for some
horrible.
woman to grab the groceries out of his car, and then he would kill them.
It's crazy. It's crazy,
Unbelievable.
but these people know enough to live a normal life on one level, which is why they're truly insidious. We are almost out of time. Let me just remind the folks again about your books. You have what, 17 of them out there?
17. So 14 in the Mary MacIntosh series, and then the three dating books, starting with 60 Dates in 6 Months with a Broken Neck.
Which
And
is a
it's two
wonderful book as
sequels.
well. And it has, I think you've got a sequel chapter coming there. I won't spoil it for the audience, but you had 60 dates in 6 months and no keepers, but there's a
Maybe
big but
one.
there. There's more news coming. Why don't we save that for the next time we talk about your 60 dates in 6 months and give the folks at
Right.
home something to mull over. Go
Yeah.
to, it's Maureen Meehan, MaureenAnneMeehan.com. Is that your website?
There's two different ones, MaureenMeehanBooks.com
Hmm.
and MaureenAnneMeehan.com. So I have two different websites because I have three different agents. It's
Yeah.
been a busy year. I've
Yeah.
written 11 novels this year, so keeping a lot of people hopping. And so Red Hands is actually the cover of Maple Leaf magazine this past month up in Toronto, Canada, and all over Europe. So Red Hands is my number one bestseller. So that's why we started the
Wonderful.
podcast, Only the Truth with Red Hands. And I'm very proud of it. It's being made in screenplay was made for 60 Dates already and pitched to Hollywood and now Red Hands. So we're
Wonderful.
pitching to Hollywood. We have a couple producers interested in the Mary MacIntosh series and the dating series. So I'm hoping to be an executive producer of movies soon.
That would be wonderful. The name of the books we've been focusing on primarily today are The Tooth Fairy Killer, Red
Yes,
Hands, and Deputy Dog or DB Cooper.
that's
Wonderful
correct.
books. They
Thank
are
you.
among the 17 books that Maureen has written, all highly recommended. And be sure to tune into our podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, you will find her. Maureen, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, Logan. It's always a pleasure.
Pleasure talking to you as well. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.